Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lookout. Happy September. It's been a little while since we did a legit studio live stream, so want to just kind of just a couple fires to cover, and then gonna kind of catch you up on some of the happenings around here at the Lookout with mainly work I've been doing that's not inside this shed. We had the Centerville fire today up in Butte Creek Canyon, and also looking at the bear fire that's burning up by Loyalton. So I'm going to kind of do a little map tour on that stuff, and then we'll look at some I've been shooting a lot of footage, working on a video about the park fire, kind of start to finish, and the fire effects and everything that we talked about over the course of the fire, condensed into something more manageable, maybe a half-hour video. So lots of kind of side work, and I got a little bit of footage, raw footage, to show you guys as a kind of sneak peek of that. But let's jump right in on the bear fire, and let me get my little magic pointer going here. All right. Okay, bear fire. All right, so this mapping's a few hours old now. Just to give you kind of a quick orientation. This fire is burning near Sierra Valley, and Sierra Valley is it's the largest valley in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's kind of northwest of Reno and north of Truckee, so it's kind of it's definitely what we'd call east side. So you'll hear people talk about the east side pine, east side, all kinds of east side everything. It's all kinds of stuff that happens on the east side. We're talking about the east side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So we've got the Sierra Nevada mountain range, runs from down by Mexico up to Westwood, California, Highway 36, and then it turns to the Cascade Mountains. But what the east side's kind of got going for it is it's the dry, deserty side of the mountains. So down around Bishop, you've got these 14,000 foot peaks that come down into the desert, and the crest of the Sierra kind of extends up past on the west side of Tahoe and up through kind of south of Quincy, Bucks Lake and everything, and that creates a rain shadow. So the east side is dry. When you hear people say east side pine, east side whatever, they're really talking about desert. So what we know about fires in the desert is they're dangerous. They're sneaky. They're driven by winds. They're changeable. They're unpredictable. And so what we learn, kind of in basic firefighter class is, like, if you drive into a fire in the desert, like, park your truck in the black, because who knows what the fire is going to do while you're away from your truck, right? So what we've seen in my lifetime is kind of a lot of our more east side dry forests turning to desert, being driven by wildfire. And so this is no exception here in Loyalton. We've had a lot of fire here in this area, and these fires they tend to be wind driven, right? And so this is really close to where we had the gold fire recently, and we talked a lot about how the weather affects these things. So right off the bat, let's look at our kind of fire history here, where the bear fire is burning. We've got the Cottonwood Fire from 1994 that started off of Highway 89 here and blew almost all the way to Highway 395. We've got all these other fires that kind of take the same shape here. So if we go through kind of and look at fires from the 30s and 40s and 50s, you see this common pattern, right? That they start with strong southwest winds, and they run. Sometimes they're funneled by the topography, but they run to the northeast. This fire here, Donna Ridge Fire, it started like right here west of Truckee, and it ran all the way out here to Babbitt Peak. So as we talked about before, the fire history, it tells you the potential. It shows you what fires do. So here's the Cottonwood Fire. started here and ran hard to the northeast. And oftentimes when it's not windy, we put out these fires in the desert. Tankers are effective here. This fire here is the Loyalton fire from 2020. And so there's been some discussion. We talk a lot about like how recent fires will affect the spread of subsequent fires. In this environment in the desert, it's not a sure bet that this fire is going to stop when it hits the Loyalton fire, just because that fire is full of cheatgrass and other grass and dead brush. Anyway, what we know about the Bear Fire is it's driven by strong winds today. There's been red flag warnings for winds, and it was headed for Sierra Brooks. And so, since this was mapped at about 4 p.m., it's surely out into here now. It's across this road. We don't know yet. I don't have any intel on how Sierra Brooks has fared. So sorry if you're watching from, if you got a place there. Really don't know what's going on there. I came in and looked around. There's been some fuels work done. Out here you see like these areas have been thinned around the edges of town. Can't really call it a town, but you can call it a community. So that's going to be, the intel that we're looking for, is to find out what's happened here with Sierra Brooks. We don't know yet. But what we do know is that this fire is burning in a 30-year-old burn. Some of it's been replanted. And likely a lot of the trees that have been replanted in there haven't really been thinned. I don't really know. You can kind of see out here in the Cottonwood Fire where other stuff's been planted. It's hard to tell how much planting's actually happened out here in the desert side. So that's the Bear Fire. We'll look at the webcams. Once it got across the road here, it's kind of in alignment with the wind to blow it up the slope and keep on moving it. One thing that really puts out fires here is, nighttime humidities. They come up, sun goes down, it gets cool, humidity rises, and if the wind stops blowing, oftentimes hand crews and dozers make a lot of progress on these fires at night. It's hard for us to fight these fires when they're running and driven by winds. So just to look at like let's just look at the kind of the whole fire. All right, so the fire started at about 2:45, and for the first little while it was kind of sheltered, tucked in there, and it wanted to gobble, and it took it a while to really build up a head of steam. But then by 6 p.m. it was really cranking, and you can see that it spotted. Someone's saying that it spotted like at least a mile. You can see the fire here backing down the slope. This is at 5:41, and then you can see spots out ahead of it, and then those spots have been in alignment with the wind. It doesn't look like the fire's charged super far out to the east here. Let's get another look at that. So we can get a look at it from the other side of the valley. All right, so it's 5:30 p.m. So that's a really good view there of it spotting across and starting up that slope. So you can really see what we talked about there with alignment. Here at 5:30, the fire's kind of hasn't jumped across to the slope that's facing the wind, but we talk about alignment. That's when the wind's blowing up the slope. And so this fire was generating kind of sufficient enthusiasm here at 5:30 to start putting up an ice cap, which is what is kind of our clue that it's really cranking. And so then here at 5:45, you see these little spots across the valley, and then those kind of take off. So looking at that, back to our map, it looks like the fire's kind of out up in here now. So the good news for now is that the wind's, it's not blowing right into Loyalton. If the fire had started over here, it could have gone over the hill and come right down into Loyalton. Loyalton's got quite a few people in it. I was in Loyalton in 1994 when the Cottonwood Fire burned right down to the mill here. And in the days before digital photography, stood on top of my car, kind of right here, and watched the firefight kind of on the backside of the mill. So you can see a lot of this is regrown since '94. So we'll just have to watch this. We don't have any new intel. Maybe during the time of this broadcast we'll get another flight over it. We'll check back. Alright, I'm going to jump to Centerville Fire real quick, which is right here in our backyard. Red here is the park fire. I'm not sure why it looks so weird, but... So, here's Chico, Butte Creek Canyon. And this fire started right off the road, Centerville Road. And the webcams actually captured it, like, right away. Someone said that there's the kind of AI where they're analyzing the these webcams to see to detect fires automatically. So this fire was really in good view of the Flatiron camera. Camera pointed at the fire almost immediately. So here about 3:45, fire started right off the road. This is a tough place for access because there's these crazy mud flow cliffs, and as soon as the fire, within 10 minutes the fire was on top of those bluffs, and it's really difficult to access directly from the road. So good view from the webcam, see the fire trucks show up, and there was another start like right up the road, like right there. And so pretty quick the fire's flanking up the grass on both sides, and it ended up running to the top of the canyon within 45 minutes. Is on the top of the canyon. I got up to I went up by Paradise. They had a really it took a little while for the helicopters and airplanes to get here, and then they really focused on painting the top here. So there's a dozer that went fairly direct here and a hand crew, and there's dozers on both flanks, and helicopters are dropping in these steep canyons. But it's almost guaranteed once we have a start here on the road, if we don't pick it up in the first, right off the bat, that it'll go to the top of the canyon here. But the tankers are really effective. So I shot a little video from the rim here. This is, I think, maybe one of the first times the C-130 has been flown. These are brand new tankers for CAL FIRE, and they're impressive. They're big, and they drop a lot of mud. And so look at that fresh pink mud just getting broken in. So here's the C-130.
Yeah. The Helltown Hot Shots.
The hot shots, that's right.
So they're going to be able to reload these tankers out of McClellan Air Force Base, or former Air Force Base in Sacramento, and also out of Chico. And then there's a plane that's been in use for a while, is a BAE 146. These are old passenger jets.
Yeah, I know Vanessa.
They also have one of those based in Chico. So in this country, those heavy tankers are super effective. And they basically, fire got up and over a little bit up here. It's hard to tell if it was kind of back in here a little bit, but they painted it, and it seems to be done. This fire would have hit the park fire if it really got away. So it's a pretty typical foothill fire for us here. Cal Fire is really good at picking up these fires on initial attack. This fire is a good example of what would have happened on the park fire if the park fire hadn't started right below the power lines. But over here, you know, here's the park fire. It started right here. It burned up to the top of the canyon, not quite as steep, but they couldn't drop right across the head of the fire because of these power lines. You can't drop on the power lines. They don't want to get mud on the wires. And so we got these kind of high risk spots on the landscape where we can't use our most effective tools. Other than that, air tankers are extremely effective on these fine fuels. So we're lucky here that nothing kept us from using those tankers. All right, so while we're talking about all that, what else we got here? Okay, we're gonna go to Oregon real quick. Got one more shot from this kind of just a bigger picture view of that Centerville fire today. It was kind of cooking up a few spots in the heavy kind of gullies, the heavy smoke. These new helicopters from Cal Fire are super duper. They carry a ton of water and they're really nimble. They draft. They don't use buckets like the old helicopters. They actually have a hose that they lower down. All right, so I'm gonna jump up real quick to Oregon because we care about Oregon, of course. A little late on the draw on this particular fire, Copperfield, but Copperfield took off yesterday afternoon. Grew pretty quickly. We're up by Chiloquin, so north of Klamath Lake. Here's Klamath Lake, and this fire got started and kind of this is also east side, you know, this desert side of Oregon, east side of the Cascades, and so this fire ran pretty hard yesterday, several miles, and then this mapping is several hours old. It looks like 3 p.m. It's hard to tell if the stuff's in Universal Standard Time, like Greenwich Mean Time, or not. But the heat satellites are showing it's grown a bit since that mapping. Like it's pushed out farther, and it's pushing towards an area here that's got quite a bit of structures off of like Sprague River Road. Not a ton of them, but there's quite a few people living out here. Copperfield, last night they pushed with dozers up the flanks of it, and I think had some success with that. But the head here, it's kind of typical with when you've got the wind and these heavy fuels and poor access, that there's limits to what you can get done on the kind of the head end of the fire. So far what we know is it's still still growing, as you can tell by these heat satellite dots. We get spoiled in California, and we get really good intel. And in Oregon, they don't spend quite as much money on these things, and they don't have as many people, and ODF doesn't have the CAL FIRE budget. They'd like to. According to this satellite here wasn't mapping a lot of new heat. The orange squares are 12 hours old, and so it shows that most of the spread on this fire on the Copperfield is on the northwest quarter of it. So we'll get some better perimeters from that as they get up to speed. It takes a while to get up to speed and get the initial perimeters if you don't have the fancy CAL FIRE intel planes flying. And I don't have fire history layer for this part of Oregon loaded up. While we're up here, just want to talk a little bit about dams, because Lookout's all about land, right? So been hearing, if you look on Facebook and talk about the dam removal on the Klamath River, there's so much misinformation. Crazy amount of misinformation on the Klamath, right? So you basically, here's the big picture of what we're talking about with the Klamath region, and this is gonna stray into people's belief systems. Can't talk about water without talking about belief systems, right? Okay, we're just gonna talk about geography though. Here's Mount Shasta. Here's Klamath Falls. Here's the Klamath River. So Klamath River starts up here by Crater Lake and flows down to the Klamath Lake, and then it makes its way all the way out here down to Hoopa and out to the coast. Huge salmon river for the west coast, one of the biggest salmon rivers for the west coast. And way back when, some folks came and saw this desert landscape, and they said, if we could put water to this here desert landscape, we could make it bloom, and we could grow horseradish and potatoes, and we could really make something here. And so they did. They sucked some water out of the Klamath. They built some dams. They built a lot of dams, and they plumbed and drained and did all the things, and irrigated the desert here. And it's kind of like a high elevation Salinas Valley. We're not growing lettuce, we're growing alfalfa. A lot of alfalfa. Look at all that. That dark green is alfalfa. Potatoes, horseradish. A lot of money in that. So over time, our definition of kind of the highest and best use of land is shifted, and there's a lot of assumptions about what my grandpa has a water right, therefore I should have a right to that till the end of eternity. That's the West, right? So anyway, the Klamath, in addition to having dams on Klamath Lake and a whole bunch of little structures here that manage the flows of the Klamath up through, there's all kinds of plumbing here. Well, downstream then they built hydropower dams on the river, and they kind of stair-stepped down through the upper Klamath Gorge, and then when you get down to about I think Iron Gate's the lowest one, where I-5 goes through. But there's a whole bunch of stair-step dams, and people have been taking them out, and then people who don't have here's some of those dams. So the one thing I hear people say a lot is like, you're taking all these dams, you're hurting all these farmers. We need that water for agriculture. It's like, well, no, that's different. Like, agriculture gets all its water from up here at Klamath Lake. These dams lower on the system, there's no agricultural use. So okay, that's misinformation number one. That removing dams on a Klamath is um, gonna devastate agriculture in the Klamath Basin. It's not, because these dams down here, you got nothing to do with water storage. They got nothing to do with agriculture. They say also, okay, man, if you take out all these dams, how you gonna charge your Tesla? Because there's hydropower on these. Okay, fair, but they contributed like 2% of the energy that's used in Pacific Power. Oh, and these dams. What are you gonna do without all that flood control that these dams provide? Well, these dams aren't very big, and if there's huge storms, like these fill up, and they don't provide flood control. They weren't designed for flood control. They're designed for hydropower. Anyway, people love their dams. People think this is. I don't know who I'm talking about. There's a lot of people on Facebook that are saying like, "This is the end of the world. Save our dams. Save Siskiyou County." The biggest problem with these dams was that the water in these got super stank, and it was bad for the fish. There's this, as we said, there's these huge salmon runs on the Klamath historically, and dams in the desert are bad for water quality. And then you compound that with like all the runoff from all the agriculture up here, all the nutrients and everything else, and I mean, even up here at Klamath Lake, like when I was a kid, like the logger across the street got addicted to Klamath blue-green super algae. It was like a pyramid scheme, and you could buy your little bottles of super blue-green algae, and it made you super vital. So it's like, okay, you got this big stagnant, shallow lake that's grows algae like no one's. I mean, look at that big green water. So right off the bat, the water quality is getting pretty jacked, and then you dump it into a bunch of other kind of stagnant lakes that shouldn't be there in these canyons, and it's bad for fish. So I'm glad the dams are gone. I think we're going to see good things happen. I'm sorry if you got lakefront property and now you don't have a lake anymore. I do think that as long as we've got like all this agriculture diverting all this upper Klamath water, it's like, man, if you want, like, take them all out, right? But got all these people that decide they're going to grow alfalfa in the desert, and so they get to take all this water. But the thing that's going on is that the Klamath River tribes, they've got a right to live off the fish, and they've been here a long time, and people just kind of stole this water before the tribes really had any power. So the tribes have been lobbying hard, get their dams, get their river back. I hope it's not too late. A lot of different stressors on the fish. Anyway, that's our detour. If you don't like if you don't like my damn politics, well, you don't have to watch my channel. Klamath's awesome. If you missed your dams, I'm sorry. I hope that your grandkids have a healthier river. All right, some B-roll. So I got a chance to go up in the Park Fire. This is right above Chico. Like I said, we're working on a video about the fire effects, and this is kind of right on the southern edge of the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. The fire ripped out of here at the worst possible time of day, up canyon winds, and so it's just kind of a first look at the fire effects in the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. It really roasted up there, and gonna probably have some real problems with the runoff here, just because there's not a lot left to kind of slow the rainfall of the water. So the video we're making about the fire, it kind of talks about why this area burns so hot compared to other areas. The timing, the weather, everything else. One thing you can see out here that's encouraging is like all these crazy green sprouts, like insane amount of resprouting already happening on the live oak, and so that's food for critters that survive the fire, and also for migratory critters like the deer that are going to come back in here. A lot of good food for these critters, but pretty freaking smoked. This is a park fire in Mud Creek, just outside of Cohasset. This also was a place where the topography, winds, and bad kind of fire weather all lined up to just completely nuke out this watershed, the Mud Creek watershed. One thing we're going to talk about in the video also is that like this is literally like 100 yards from where I shot that last video, right? Let's turn off this. Here in Cohasset, is Mud Creek here, and the fire came roasting up out of there. And let's see if we can so these are some areas that we burned in Cohasset, and the fire, when I showed you that picture of the just kind of completely nuked canyon, that stuff was shot in here looking up this canyon. And then this video I've got here, this is right on top of the canyon. So right where we burned, it got all thinned, and then we burned this last spring, last fall, I can't remember. And a lot of these trees survived. So coincidence, maybe, but it's really awesome to walk around out there and see like the fire came charging up out of this canyon, hit this area that had been thin that we burned in, and it stopped. There's places in here where it didn't even burn at all. And then that kind of took some of the momentum out of the fire. We don't know if that really made a difference for saving Cohasset, if it's just the weather changed, but it's pretty striking to be right on the edge here and just see the contrast. Now right 100 yards from there in the canyon, this is why we're worried about erosion in the park fire, is just there's no organic material left in the soil in a lot of these places. There are sprouts on these trees. A lot of these trees are coming back from the base, but there's not any grass seed here to like seed back in, so as soon as it rains little, in places where it didn't burn so hot, there'll be grass seed, but not here. But anyway, yeah, 100 yards away in the burn and thinning area, it looks like that. All right, so let's jump back and see if we got a new perimeter yet for Bear Fire. Yep, so no new perimeter there, as far as I can tell. There we go, new perimeter. All right, so here's perimeter as of 7 p.m., so right when we started this broadcast. So I might be wrong about this out here, but the good news here is that the fire in this mapping hadn't gone right through town. So they're saying 1,200 acres at 650. All right, that's good news. I just want to talk a little bit about forecasts. We're kind of at this point, it's like, where are we at in the season? There's a tendency to not want to call the end of fire season, which is good. You know, fall winds historically bring our worst fires. But we do start to move now into this time where we have longer nights, they're cooler, the humidity recovers. And so this is the forecast here for the Bear Fire for the Loyalton, Sierraville area. Max temps up there, 80 is pretty reasonable. It's supposed to be 91 on Thursday. The minimum temp's really what we're most interested in from a firefighting perspective. So this tomorrow night, 42 degrees with a humidity of 60. That's great for firefighting in fine fuels, because the fire basically, without strong winds, can't really move when it's that moist and that cold. Tomorrow though is supposed to be dry, so kind of peak burning period tomorrow. Like if they don't get around this fire tonight, tomorrow it could be dry and hot, not super windy though. So we're not seeing like super critical conditions for this bear fire to like grow like crazy in the next few days. Just because we've got some gusts tomorrow, 2 p.m., same wind direction. So a lot of it's going to depend on how much they get done tonight with the dozers and crews. There's not a lot of other fires demanding resources in California right now, so that's a good thing as far as crew availability. So we'll see where that goes. The big picture for fire hazard this week is today we had these red flag warnings for winds. So they called it pretty well, right? They said here on the east side, watch out for winds. If you have new starts, they're going to go quickly. That's what happened with bear fire. So tomorrow it's just supposed to be dry, not windy. Wednesday dry. Thursday also dry, but then Friday we start looking at lightning hazard. And so we've got this ridge of high pressure that's been sitting over here and keeping it hot, and that's breaking down today, and there's a low pressure moving across the north of the state. And so that movement is what creates those winds. The high pressure wants to go to where it's low pressure. And so there's a chance of thunderstorms coming also because of that, the trough. The low moving into our area is pushing from other areas, and that the moisture can kind of suck into the area and create the thunderstorms. They said widespread dry weather is happening tomorrow, including near the coasts. So that continuing Wednesday and Thursday. So that's when we get our fire hazards on the coast, is when it's really dry or when it's windy. So the thunderstorm potential, it can happen as early as Thursday, but more likely Friday and Saturday. Fuels are dry, critically so. Really important thing with all this though is that as we move farther into September, the shorter days and cooler nights and higher humidities in general really start to create conditions where we don't have as many fires escape initial attack unless it's really windy. And so we move into this kind of black and white world of fire, where either we've got critical east winds and we can't put the fires out and we have a Tubbs fire scenario or a campfire scenario, or we put the fires out right away because it's not windy and it's cool and cold even, and moisture at night, and days are short. So we talk a lot about the length of the burn period, meaning like what's the time of day that you've got critical fire weather conditions. So every day now it's getting shorter. The burn window shrinks. So this fire like in Butte Creek Canyon today, like as soon as the sun goes behind the rim and those areas are in shade, they're way less flammable. So that's the big deal for September. Winds are the wild card. If you don't have winds, generally we'll get better and better at initial attack because the burn window gets shorter. Fire can't get up and go and run. In July, a fire that starts at 1 in the afternoon can burn for 7 hours, and before the sun goes down and things mellow out. This time of year, fire gets started at 1. It's like it's in the shadows by 5, and so you've got half the burn period. So the potential for fires to have major growth in a single afternoon goes way down just because the afternoon's shorter. All right. All right, so I'm just going to jump into our little Intel page here real quick. All right. I've been wanting to cover the fire. I haven't, just because it's far afield from us, but as you can see from this shape, there's these big firing operations going on to kind of contain this within a box. And there's an interesting story there, I'm sure. Just haven't had time to watch it. This is down by Fresno in Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. But I've been seeing some posts where people are like, oh man, it's off to the races. Like, it grew more. It's like a lot of what's happening down there, a lot of the fire behavior you're seeing when there's a plume blow up on it is because they're lighting it with helicopters. They're getting a lot of good fire effects in the sequoia groves down here. I wish we could cover it, but I've been busy with consulting work. Anyway, let's jump here. I just want to talk a little bit about fuels. That kind of wraps up our fire coverage. The company I work for, Deer Creek Resources, we write community wildfire protection plans. So we look at the landscape, we look at the conditions, and then we tell our clients where we think they should focus their prescribed fire or thinning or public outreach and education or other mitigation work. And so been working in Yuba County right now. We're doing a CWPP for Yuba County. We're doing a CWPP for Shasta County. We're doing one for the city of Redding. I just wrapped one up for the American River Parkway. And so what we're looking at when we go out there is like, where are the fuels bad? Where do you have stuff that, a fire that started by the road could go through the vegetation and get to someone's house? And so, here this is bad because there's juniper that someone planted as their landscape, and it goes right up into the canopy, and you've got like highly flammable, like oleander's flammable, juniper's flammable, rosemary's flammable, lavender's flammable. So this is a kind of bad situation, and where you've got heavy fuels right up, next to a wooden structure that's got a fence that goes right up to it that's wood. So this is an area that burned 27 years ago. And so we look at places where we think they could do like roadside thinning. This is Yuba County, right? So trees that got planted after the fire 27 years ago that haven't really been thinned, that are super close together. This is the kind of stuff where we look at and say, hey, this should be thinned. So the biggest objective, if you're looking at a property either to buy it or to manage it because you want to live there or you want your house to stay safe, like we're looking at the continuity of fuels and looking at like, okay, if you had a fire that was just burning on the ground, could it get up into the canopy of the trees? And once that happens, it's a whole different ballgame. If a fire stays on the ground, firefighters can come in, they can squirt water, and they can cut lines, and they can control it. But as soon as it starts torching up into the trees, it starts throwing embers over control lines, over firefighters. It becomes really dangerous and really difficult if there's any wind at all. So when we talk to homeowners and people who are managing land, we really talk about like, hey, remove these branches, remove these, thin these trees so there's not such density. And then, the biggest reason to cut along roads is just so firefighters can get in there, or if you can try to firefight off the road, you aren't going to get burned up necessarily. People have safe access and egress. So all I can say is that there's the scale of the problem is huge. There's millions of acres that look like this, and with houses in them. And if you're thinking about moving to a place in the foothills where there's pine trees, gray pine or ponderosa pine or whatever, like take some time to ask around, go to the fire station, or do your homework before you move to a place like this, because a lot of these places are just not going to be defensible. Like there's no amount of money we can throw at some of these landscapes that's going to make these communities safe. And so inform yourself before you commit to living here, because these places, they're beautiful and they grow vegetation like crazy, and it's just this perpetual task to manage the vegetation on a landscape this scale. It's really expensive, and there's no way that it's going to get done everywhere. So we get these, these places where there's like lots of homes scattered all over the place, and you don't have any neighbors, and you got all this privacy. So that's great if you've got the time, energy, and resources to thin and burn and thin and burn and thin and burn and thin and burn, and keep on it for the rest of your life. I mean, it's fun work up to a point, but at some point, it never stops, right? So we look also at places that have been thinned and burned in the past, and this is super common. Like this area got thinned in the last year or so, and these are tan oak sprouts. And so the tan oak comes back right away. You cut it, it sprouts back, forms this kind of brushiness. So thinning, you can't just like thin something and then just have it be nice, and like maybe you can come in here and graze this with goats, or you can spray herbicide on it, which isn't great because you're living there, and like who wants to soak their yard with herbicide? I don't. But this is like just within a year or so of this being thinned, and the tan oak's already like 4 to 6 feet tall. So there's this perpetual nature. People talk a lot about like active forest management, and if only we let the loggers do their thing, like everything would be better like it used to be. And we can, what we tell our clients is like, this is like a perpetual obligation. If you're going to decide to go somewhere and thin it, you have to follow up. And within a few years, oftentimes you won't even be able to tell that any work got done. There's just some more, tan oak resprouts. This just got, some of the stuff just got burned like, this spring. Good prescribed fire, might kill a lot of little pines and cedar and stuff that you want to not come back to make this into a thicket. This is a fuel break. But, the hardwood, controlling the hardwood is really difficult. And, yeah, all right. You can hear the tankers flying over right now. Here's some manzanita berries. This is sprouting back. So most everything that lives in these places is adapted to sprout back when you cut it or burn it. There's a big slash pile that is probably going to get burned. But it just gives you an idea of, like, it's just a lot of work to get rid of this stuff. You cut it, and then what are you going to do with it? You can't just leave it there. You can burn it in piles, so that takes a lot of work. But look at all this, it's just crazy to me, like, the regrowth immediately when you open these areas up to light. This is why we talk about having shaded fuel breaks, is that the shade helps suppress the regrowth of the brush and the other sprouting species. So there's this conflict, like, we want to thin this enough that the fires can't get up in the crowns and be a crown fire, but if we thin it too much, we let in a bunch of sunlight, and then we get a bunch of tan oak or other sprouts. So we went out and looked at ferns and cohasset we've done. Then we went out to Redding. This is in the city of Redding, within the city limits, and a lot of the rural kind of the mix on the edge of Redding looks like this. This is probably more manageable than the tan oak resprouts in the foothills. You do have just a lot of crazy stuff going on the edge of a city. Here we're looking at like telling them they should chip and weed eat. It's just one of those things you have to keep on top of. Also pile burning here to kind of clean up a lot of this stuff and burn it in the winter. But it's daunting, and it's really expensive to get anything done. Contractors, anyone who can run a chainsaw well can get a job working for the utility companies as a contractor, making a lot more money than you're going to make like on a brushing crew. So it's just really expensive. Like it can cost $10,000 to thin an acre like this, and by the time you chip it and everything else. So when we look at the city of Redding urban areas, like 40,000 acres or something. So if you start doing the math, it's like it's this enormous amount of work to fire safe landscapes. It's really nice working with the city of Reading. They're progressive. They want to figure out how to use more prescribed fire in the city, which is something City of Chico is doing. And we talk about every tool in the toolbox. Where you can get chippers in. Chippers are a lot easier to deal with than like burning piles and having to patrol them and everything. But there's just places we can't get chippers into. All right, and then we went to a track meet, and that's about enough of that. This is out in the burn just above Chico. Anyway, that's your lookout update. That's why we haven't been doing a lot of broadcasts. The day job. All that work we did on the park fire was time I wasn't working on my day job. So got customers to keep happy and projects to finish by the end of the year. But we're going to do whatever we can here with the lookout to keep it running. We got some back burner projects that are in the works, and getting some great help. Like Cal Fire got me out on the north end of the park fire with their fire behavior analyst. I really appreciate the access. And we're going to try to tell these stories. We appreciate your support. Squirrel wants to talk about biochar. Need to brush this under the rug so people pay me for consulting. All right. Biochar is awesome. You know what makes biochar? Really, a ton of biochar? A wildfire. Look at that. There's biochar for days. Millions of pounds. Don't have to truck it anywhere. A lot of these landscapes, like park fire burn, no big loss, people. Cohasset, sorry, there's a ton of loss of people's stuff. This landscape here, you can list something that looks like this, and can't say it's bad. I can't say that this is bad for this landscape. This is the way this landscape works. Squirrel, tell me how you're going to move all that biochar. It's great. I think we're just talking at different scales. You're talking about. I tend to fly around, at this elevation, and biochar is great for your, your little restoration projects and stuff. But if you're talking about like a whole city, how does it scale? How do you move millions of pounds of wood, make biochar, spread it, all that good stuff you get? I'm not saying biochar is bad. It's just not my thing. Thanks for all the comments. Yep. Catch y'all soon. I want to plug the lookout before we get off here. Not that part of it. This part here. Got some good stuff on here. We'll be putting more on here. But if you're jonesing for some lookout stuff, go back and check out our stories here on the lookout.org. If you want to send us some money, that'd be great, because the more money that comes through the lookout, the less I have to rely on all the other things that distract me from the lookout. And check out our YouTube also. We've got all sorts of stuff on here. We've got 200 videos about all kinds of stuff. For example, a short on mastication. And merch, we ordered another 50 camo hats. We're ordering sweatshirts for Christmas. We got mugs. So if you go onto the lookout page, we've got some links here for hats and shirts. And we'll send you some stuff. My wife's making these incredible mugs. Lookout mugs. We might make some axes for the holidays. We'll see how much other stuff happens. But get your merch. We got shirts too. So appreciate all your support. And someone says talk about the feather pattern. Okay. The feather pattern. Someone's asking about the feather pattern in these fires, and see if I can turn off some of this stuff. What I'm talking about with the feather pattern, we're talking about the fire history. So this is a map of all the large fires in California history since 1920s or so. And I need to turn off some stuff here. I like the biochar lady accusing me of suppressing biochar information so I can make money consulting. For sure, that's happening. Okay. Yeah, so each place we've got this kind of historic way that fires behave. So up here where the Bear Fire is burning, you get this kind of feather shape to the fires that tells you that they're wind driven. And they, the spine of the feather would be kind of where the head of the fire blew. Interestingly, on this fire, look at this fire burned before there was a subdivision here. If we had the same fire again, this fire burned in 1960, so 64 years ago, it would blast through a subdivision. But this fire here, 1926, the shape of these fires just tells you about the way that winds happen during fire season. And you really see this pronounced like you get up to around Susanville. But we talked about the east side and the kind of the character of the east side. So we turn off some of our huge fires from the last 20 years. You just see that on this kind of cusp of the east side where the winds kind of blow over the transition from the west side of the mountains to the east, like around Susanville. That's the story here, is you got all these fires that start and blow to the northeast with a strong southwest wind. Now this fire that happened at Eagle Lake in 1955, Eagle Lake burn. And as you move your way kind of up this east side here, up towards the Klamath, like east of Mount Shasta, it's just kind of it's the story on the landscape. The Scarface Fire of 77, the Damon Fire of 96, the Day Fire, 1990. Tells the story. Get out in the desert here. The 9 Mile Fire, 1973. So that's when we talk about that feather shape. Sometimes it's really pronounced, like the Angora Fire that burned in South Lake Tahoe. Is that it? Where's the Angora? Oh, there's the Angora Fire here. Started up here, just blew with the winds towards the northeast. Really interesting thing about this fire, the Angora Fire, was that the spread of the fire went straight down this street and it burned all these homes. And there's a lot of places like that where the geography of how we lay out our neighborhoods sometimes just lines right up with our prevailing fire winds. And so it sets places up for disaster. All right. Anyway, yeah, fire history you can talk about for days. The scary places are the places that don't have fire history, right? Like if you look at places where we haven't had any fires since the 1950s. The Upper River watershed, Grass Valley, Nevada City, and then you look at like how many structures are out there. But these are the places that keep me awake at night. Are these places where you've got both an insane amount of homes, heavy fuels that look like the images we showed you of Yuba County, and no fire history. And so this these Cal Fire C-130s, they're gonna put out lots of fires. They're gonna keep saving these places over and over and over, but eventually we're gonna have a fire that doesn't care about C-130s, the strong winds from the east or night or whatever, and those fires are gonna be the next campfire. So the C-130s, it's great. I was glad watching the fire today in Butte Creek Canyon that the C-130s put it out and saved us from more trauma. But they're not the end all. They're not really the long-term solution. They're going to keep convincing people that it's safe to live in some incredibly dangerous places that look like we're going to have the wind-driven fire, and what keeps you safe is fire history, having a burn nearby that reduced fuels and removed that kind of reset the landscape in a lot of ways. So this stuff scares me to death. These big chunks of no fires. And we can do a lot of planning. We can say like, hey, this is Yuba County here, where we're doing our plan, and we can tell them all about what we think they should do to keep these yellow dots from turning black. But when it comes down to the kind of the problem of the scale and the relentless growth of vegetation, it's tough, And so you see this feather shape here. Talked about how there's this area where the fire burned 27 years ago. This landscape here burned in this fire. So you got a whole landscape of fuels like this that are set up for the next wind-driven fire. Anyway, all right, people. Blah blah blah. Thanks for supporting the Lookout. We'll keep working on this stuff. Bye.